From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
Support comes from Vision Zero. On foot or behind the wheel, safety is a shared responsibility. And Vision Zero Louisville believes 0 roadway fatalities is the only acceptable amount. Their mission is to create safe roads by design, engineering solutions, and education. More information at visionzerolouisville.org.
I'm a Jew from Kentucky, that's what I am. The good Lord foresaw it with his infinite plan.
Shalom and welcome to Season 2 of the Bluegrass Schmooze. I'm Rabbi Ben Fried.
And I'm Rabbi Shania Abramowitz.
And we are so thrilled to be back here with you for Season 2. We have a great show coming up for you to lead off the season. We are talking about Jewish food. This is our Tishrei episode. This is our episode for the first Jewish month of the year. And you might be wondering what holidays happen in Tishrei, what's going on in the Jewish world at this time. And for that, you can go back and listen to our Tishrei episode in Season 1. We talk all about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot and Simchat Torah and all of those great holidays. So please go back and check it out if that is something you are interested in. Or you can stick with us here. And we will talk about the Jewish culinary experience. We're going to be talking first with a good friend of the pod, Avery Robinson. And then after a break, we're going to kibitz with a couple of Kentuckians who make amazing Jewish food here in the Commonwealth. So, Shani, do you want to introduce Avery?
I would love to. It's so great to welcome Ben, as you said, a friend to the Bluegrass Schmooze. Avery received his BA and MA from the University of Michigan, where his graduate work focused on Jewish American culinary history. An experiential educator, Avery has led camping trips with Camp Ramah in Canada and Moishe House, ran the Imagination Station at New Country Day Camp, and taught hundreds how to bake bagels in quarantine. Avery is a co-founder of Rye Revival and the manager of Black Rooster Foods, a rye bread company. He is also currently an engagement officer at the Natan Fund. A native Detroiter, he currently lives in Brooklyn. And Avery was also Ben's roommate for 2 years in Ann Arbor and studied at the Hadar Institute with me a few years ago.
So we are so thrilled to have Avery here to share some Jewish culinary knowledge with us. Avery, welcome to the Schmooze.
Thanks so much, Ben and Shani. It's great to be here.
So I guess we'll just kick things off with this, kind of most basic of questions. You are the person who I've literally been to you give lectures on this topic. So we figured you would be an appropriate person to ask, what is Jewish food? I feel like it's something that we hear about all the time, but how would you define it?
So the way that I would define Jewish food to a lay audience would be to think about any other ethno-cultural food. So when we think of Italian food, when we think of Mexican food, when we think of Southern food, we happen to have these ideas of particular ingredients, preparation styles, and also foods that are laden with meaning and are relevant for particular holidays. And Jewish food fits into that. And Jewish food is particularly unique among foodways in that Jews have lived all around the world. We are culinary chameleons. We've adapted the foods of our local communities, and we have also migrated across the world, and so continue to adapt. And so there is no there's no singular Jewish food, but there are many manifestations of what make Jewish food. It's also important to recognize that Jewish food has been historically and religiously informed by the laws of kosher, of what makes food acceptable for Jews to eat, but also we know that many Jews do not keep kosher. And so these laws are not always followed, and it can be more of a suggestion.
Yeah, I know we talked last season with Sarah Bradley, and she was telling us about her sweet potato latkes with bacon, which
that's so good.
I know, but right, that the ways that Jewish food grows and changes depending on where the Jews happen to be at that time, I think is a very cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I tell people, oh, I'm Jewish, and they kind of try to make connection with me, they'll sometimes say things like, oh, I've had matzo ball soup, or like, I also like bagels. Um, when did this kind of because you specifically, I know, studied kind of American Jewish culinary history, when did our like American version of Jewish food kind of come into being? Like this, what Seinfeld would eat kind of a thing. Or like how did that version of Jewish food that like Americans associate as Jewish food, like how did that happen?
So it happened in the same way that most other Jewish foods came to be, which is through migration and also the other cultural factors that were happening in society at the time, which included globalization of foodways, new technology, and also increasing affluence of the Jewish community. This in America, we really see this starting to happen at the turn of the 19th, 20th century. We have 2.5 million Jews effectively moving to the United States from Europe. And these are starting with a large German migration in the mid 19th century, and then moving into the Eastern European and Central European Jews in the late 19th, early 20th. And so you have this huge demographic shift. And a lot of it happens to center in New York City, where Jews move to the Lower East Side. And it's the most highly populated or densely populated city in the world. Is the Lower East Side in the 19 teens. And many of these Jews have their own particular foodways and their own particular kosher foods that do not necessarily mix with their neighbors. And so there's so many bakeries, butchers, appetizing shops that come to be. And then these migrate with Jews, whether it's uptown to the other boroughs or to other parts of the United States. And this has manifested later in what we understand to be kitchen Judaism, which is a term that I believe is either Barbara Kirschenbach-Gimblett or Jenna Weissman-Joslett, who are both incredible academics who write about Jewish culinary history and Jewish culinary identity. They read about one of them, who unfortunately it's not coming to me, writes about this, and it's the way in which Jews manifest their cultural identity through the food that we eat. Later, it comes to be, and you pointed out that Seinfeld does this, is that Jews are identified by the food that we eat in America that are like bagels and babka and matzo ball soup. And these have become iconic American foods. And we often joke today and are really about like people being cardiac Jews, about people who are Jews in their heart because of all the the brisket and the corned beef and the schmaltz that they eat. It really affects their heart. And that's where they feel most Jewish.
I definitely identify as a cardiac Jew, or I aspire. It's a little bit harder in Lexington to commit to that identity, but I aspire to be a cardiac Jew. And just, I don't mean to interrupt you, Avery, but you're sort of setting us up perfectly for the next question, which is what's something that people assume is a Jewish food, but actually isn't?
Ooh, great cue. There's a lot of foods that people identify as Jewish foods. And when you think of Jewish, especially in America and also in Israel, we have the sense that Jewish is actually like Eastern European food. And so many people may see hummus, like a tub of hummus from a grocery store, as a Jewish food. And depending on their experience with that, they wouldn't be wrong. However, it is not uniquely or exclusively Jewish. And similarly, bagels. So bagels are these quintessential New York Jewish bread that is really only experienced in America from like a Jewish lens. Like it's very rare that you would find a bagel that has no Jewish heritage or pedigree. But you can still get bagels with like bacon on them, and you can get that in New York City, where it is actually the most iconic breakfast for the city is a bacon, egg, and cheese on a bagel or a roll. But that's not necessarily a Jewish thing. That's a New York thing. But just the way that the bagel has evolved and migrated across the United States and also around the world, it has a very strong Jewish pedigree. Bagel's origins are not necessarily Jewish. They're actually Polish. They're a bread of Polish nobility. And then, like most foods that Jews get excited by, they're like, oh my God, this is like our food. Famously, we can think of gefilte fish, another Eastern European or Central European Ashkenazi classic dish, which is a dish it's a force meat where you take the flesh of a fish or the meat of a fish and you blend it up with some sort of spices, often carrots and onions, maybe some matzo meal. If you were a Western or Central European Jew, you could add sugar to this. And if you were a Russian or Litvak Jew, then you would be adding salt and pepper, but no sugar. And this dish has its origin in Central European court cuisine. So the term is gefilte fish, literally means stuffed fish. Gefilte in Yiddish or in German is stuffed. And what people would do is they would take this large fish, often a carp or some other freshwater fish, and they would take out the flesh, and then they would mix it up, put it back into the fish, and bake it. And when they would serve it, it would be this fish that looked like it was a whole fish, but all the fish was separated from the bones, and it was this very like regal and labor-intensive preparation that we have now adapted into our like fish croquettes that we will boil and then serve with a slice of carrot on them and some horseradish. And so this food that has become distinctly Jewish today really has an origin in European court cuisine.
In case you're listening and you've never had gefilte fish, there is nothing regal about it. I'm a gefilte fish hater. I'm just going to be really honest.
No.
It's a cold fish hot dog, and I'm not here for it. I respect that a lot of people like their gefilte fish, but I am not into the gefilte.
And that's the great thing about Judaism, is that you may hate it and I love it. And Shani can sit in the middle and we can all have our own perspectives on this wonderful dish.
Go gaga for a good gefilte fish. And I have to say, in Lexington, there is jarred gefilte fish in the store, but not my preferred brand. Gefilte fish, herring and wine sauce, all of it. Yeah.
I will also just note a side note about Jewish food that intersects with, I don't know if I'd call it Jewish literary tradition or Jewish children's books, but one of the children's books that is like a classic Jewish children's book in America is called The Carp in the Bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you heard the children's book Carp in a Bathtub, you might assume like, oh, there's a carp that grows up in the bathtub and it becomes friends with the whole family. And that's so sweet. No. In the Jewish children's book version, the carp is in the bathtub so that the grandma can turn it into gefilte fish.
Fatten it
up. And like, it is so a part of like every Jewish person I know who like had a fairly Jewish home, like had this book as a kid, and how we're not all like terribly scarred from this experience. Or maybe we are. And like, that's, we just need more therapy. But it's just like, it's that the food is connected to the writing, is connected to the children's books. It's like, it is so much a part of, I love that word that you used, Avery, kitchen Judaism, that whether your family happens to be religiously Jewish or not, that you often have that kitchen component that is interwoven into your identity, which I think is very cool.
If I can just put a note on the gefilte fish, carp in the bathtub. People put the carp in the bathtub not because they were fattening it up, but because they were cleaning it out. And this is something people were doing in the Danube when they were living in Budapest and elsewhere in Central Europe, is that they actually needed to clean the fish, which was in all these gross, muddy rivers and lakes, and they needed to clean it out. So they put it in fresh water in the tub and would roll it out so that the fish got clean. There was like less muck in there. Also, carp is just a gross fish, in my honest opinion. And so you really do need to clean it out. And then you also really need to like mix it up with onion, garlic, salt, pepper, sugar, whatever your flavors are, because it's just such a bland fish. My family makes our gefilte fish with whitefish and pickerel from Lake Michigan, which I don't think there's a better way to make your gefilte fish and celebrate your holidays.
My mother-in-law, Joseph's mom, actually makes a layered gefilte fish, almost like a cake for Rosh Hashanah and Pesach. And for those who are not here in studio, Ben is like trying hard not to throw up as I describe this delectable dish. But she does a combo of whitefish and salmon, and it's beautiful. It's really, and then with the beet horseradish on top, it's really yeah.
I'm sure it's delightful.
For those who are looking for a recipe for layered gefilte fish, there is a cookbook written by my friends Jeff Yaskowitz and Liz Alper called the Gefilte Manifesto. They used to have a company called the Gefilteria, where they would make this artisan gefilte fish and they would ship it around the country. I don't know if they're still shipping, but their recipes are available online. And you can also get a hat with a carp in a bathtub logo on it.
Okay, I might have to get that. So one of the things that you talked about that I found really interesting is this idea that many Jewish foods are also other people's foods, that because, as you said, kind of being cultural chameleons, like going to all these different places, there's, as you said, in America, often Ashkenazi Jewish food is, connected to Judaism, but there are Jews from Yemen and Morocco and all these places, and they adapt local foods to be Jewish. But then that can also lead to some conflict when different people claim foods as their own. You mentioned hummus. I know falafel. Schnitzel. Is it Israeli? Is it, Austrian? I'm curious, like, how in the culinary world, when you talk about food like that I know that sometimes, like, schnitzel seems a little bit easier because, like, I don't think Austria or Israel are, like, really going to battle over schnitzel. But I know that hummus and falafel and shawarma and, like, some of these specifically Middle Eastern foods that have been Jewish or Israeli foods, but are also foods that are common in Arab countries and eaten by Muslims and Christians and all these different people, is like the politics of claiming a food as one's own. How does that play out in the, I guess, in the academic world or in the people who study Jewish food? What does that look like?
So food is political. Who's growing your food, the ingredients, how is that shipped around the world, who has access to certain foods, thinking about also welfare systems that allow us to have nutritional support and other issues that address food insecurity. There's a lot of politics at play with food before you even talk about what is the specific dish and what is its origins. It's very difficult to identify throughout history, this is the exact moment when this particular dish, as we understand it today, was created. We can do that with a few dishes, especially dishes that are created in the 20th century, like thinking about the cronut, which was innovated by Dominic Ansel in 2013, or Sasha, this famous cake from Austria, from Vienna. And with a lot of these foods that are part of the gastro-diplomatic feuds between Israel and other countries, or Jews and other countries, it's very difficult to actually understand where that origin is and if there was a particular individual who owns that concept of that recipe. Owning recipes is also a very, very difficult thing. Like chocolate chip cookies, there are millions of variations, and they by and large didn't exist until the Toll House Inn made the Toll House chocolate chip cookie. And so we think of recipes or foods as having these very clear ethnic or cultural identities and origins. And they do, but they don't often hold ownership over them. And I think the ownership is really what gets in the way, or the arguments around ownership and whose food belongs to whom. It gets in the way of the enjoyment of the food and the recognition of the different people that are producing and consuming that food, which I think are often opportunities for making connections and building bridges. Like if we can talk about how like Abu Hassan's hummus in Jaffa, which is a particularly famous hummus restaurant in Israel, owned by a Palestinian Arab, like how that makes incredible food, and it brings Israelis, Palestinians, tourists, and everyone else through its door every single day. Like that is a wonderful vision for how food can bring people together, and not so much the fights that are happening with the Guinness record books over who can make bigger hummus, whether it's someone in Lebanon or someone in Jerusalem, or who owns falafel, or what's the problem with buying hummus in a grocery store in America because it's owned by Sabra, which was then bought by Pepsi, and is that really a big problem? And at the end of the day, it's like, no, if you enjoy the food, enjoy the food. But like, if like how deeply political or like frustrated do you need to get into this? And if eating Jewish food, as you call it, is a way for you to engage Jews, then like that's a really wonderful entree into understanding Jewish community, culture, history, and food. But it shouldn't be limited to that. Like there are many ways of making a bagels. There's many ways of making gefilte fish or croquettes. There's many ways of enjoying hummus and falafel and pita, and even pita in itself in Israel is a whole different world. We can get into that.
So on that note, in the ways that Jews adapt food and are cultural and culinary chameleons, there are also certain things that Jews throughout the world kind of do the same way. For instance, I was thinking of cholent, which in Eastern Europe is kind of this barley and potato and meat-based stew, and it's specifically made by starting the cooking process before Friday evening, before Shabbat begins, when we can't do any work, and then just letting it continue cooking until Saturday lunch. These days, that's usually done with a crock pot. Historically, you might have taken your pot to the baker, who had an oven that just kind of continued going, and everyone's pots would be in there together. And in North Africa, in the Middle East, there's a similar idea called hamin, which tastes different because it uses different spices and different flavors and perhaps different base ingredients. I'm not super knowledgeable there, but in a way that the Jews culturally and culinarily chameleoned, but in similar ways. So I'm wondering, are there other ways that even as Jews adapted to the flavors around them, like, is there something that when you look at a food from anywhere in the world that you can like be like, oh, that's a Jewish version of this because of X? Like, is there anything similar to that kind of like Friday night to Saturday cooking that like is a way that Jews have adapted, or a way that Jews have done something that would make a dish, whether it's from Yemen or Morocco or Paris or Moscow, like a Jewish dish?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head that this overnight dish that has to follow the laws of Shabbat and also of kashrut are ways of marking a dish as being inherently Jewish. There are dishes that slow cooked stews. I'm thinking particularly of cassoulet in France, and also even of like a Texas chili that can be cooked overnight and are very long, slow cooked. But none of those have the religious obligations that prevent that food from being eaten by a community if they were not cooked properly, meaning that like the food was not set before a certain time on a Friday or the start of a holiday. And so you do have like particular limitations there. You also have instances of pastries and breads, especially in Central Europe, that are made with butter and made with lard or made with milk, things that would not be acceptable for kosher keeping Jews to eat on a holiday when they were eating a meat meal, or even just a regular day when they were eating a meat meal. And so we can look at challah, this iconic Friday night loaf that is effectively a non-dairy version of brioche bread. I mean, the way that we have challah today, which is really a German-French loaf that is a beautifully decorated, it's often braided, and it is an enriched bread that has eggs and often some sort of fat, mostly oil in American iterations, and then also sugar, and it has an oil wash on the, or an oil or egg wash on the top. And this is very, very similar to a brioche bread, which is made with butter and milk. And one can just imagine the Jews who were hanging out next to their Christian bakery and the neighborhood Christian bakery and be like, wow, this is an amazing bread. I want to have that at my Sabbath table to elevate my Shabbat meal. And so this Shabbat bread that is now ubiquitous around the Jewish world, which we call challah, which is the biblical term for the bread that you would be separating in the temple, is in fact a bread that has origins in a non-Jewish and explicitly dairy practice. And we can look at similar breads and cakes that also are made with milk or made with lard, or and that Jews have just turned into a non-dairy parve food. And so those are like a very iconic thing that you can see across the Jewish world, with like Jews who lived in the Middle East and North Africa. There were often meats that were marinated in yogurt, and Jews would have adaptations that did not include that. And also for the Turkish Jews, folks who were living in Greece and Turkey. And so that's another space where you can look at the preparation of dishes and actually look at it and be like, oh, this could very well be a Jewish community's adaptation of this food. You can't always say that it is, which is an important thing, because sometimes it's about access of ingredients. But by and large, you can look at these things and be like, there's this Jewish community that's living right next to this other community. And the main difference between their foods is that the Jews are not cooking with dairy in the same way that these other people are, or that the Jews are not cooking with pork where their neighbors are.
It's so fascinating, Avery, because I think there is an assumption, or we often think about kosher and the laws of kashrut as something that keeps us apart from other communities. And it's just a nice reminder that even though we make adaptations to accommodate Jewish law and ritual in terms of keeping kosher, that we actually have much more in common in terms of our food cultures and our food ways. And that, I think, just thinking about what it means to be in community is a really helpful reminder. We have one last question for you, which is, just tell us a little bit about what's the next big thing in Jewish food.
What is the next big thing in Jewish food? That's a really difficult question, and I am not a seer. But while I think about that, I want to share my favorite quote about Jewish food, which is from the Seer of Lublin. So that was not a planned segue, but the Seer of Lublin famously said that just as one's mitzvot and transgressions are weighted for one's merit in the world to come, so too is the amount of kogel they ate in honor of Shabbos. Which, I don't know if that's going to actually lead into what is the next thing in Jewish food, but my understanding of what's happening in the social media world and what's happening in Jewish cookbook publishing is that there is a shift back to understanding Jewish food as being part and parcel of this broader culinary community, and which includes the ethnic origins of wherever those chefs are coming from, which includes the neighbors in their town, whether it's like the Hungarian bistro in Brooklyn that has influences from the chef's Hungarian grandparents, and also Ashkenazi, non-Hungarian, Jewish American grandparents, and also just the food in Brooklyn, and also what's happening in Hungary. Or it's, cookbooks that are looking at, Jewish Italian history and really leaning into the Italian history as a part of the Jewish history. And I think we are seeing that the Jewish otherness that may have been a part of cookbooks in the mid to late 20th century are really actually becoming part of this like celebration of Jewish as a component of the ethnic otherness, which is hopefully a way to see Jews as a part of the broader community and not as a separate community. I also think that, as I'm rambling, that kosher restaurants that are much more appealing to a broader audience are also going to be something that we're going to see more, like Lair House in Boston, which is now opening up in DC, which is a kosher restaurant, but it's appealing to a much broader community, and it's also innovating across Jewish food.
It's the Jewish Italian or the Jewish Hungarian or that it's people embracing their Judaism as a part of their identities and like looking deep into all of their identities, of which Judaism is a part, but not necessarily the only thing.
Yeah, we're a hyphenation. It's great.
Hyphenation.
Which Yehuda Kurtzer is where I get that term from.
I love that.
So
and another big thing I should mention, because you're here, is I know that Avery is working hard to make rye a big thing, not only in the Jewish food world, but in the food world in general. So your rye breads, your rye whiskeys, all of that. I know that your rye revival is also a big part of what you hope will be the next big thing, not only in Jewish food, but in America's culinary future.
Yeah, I don't even know it's the next big thing. We're just really going into our cultural history. Rye whiskey was the original American whiskey, and Eastern European Jews used to eat rye bread 6 to 7 days a week. And so we're leaning back into our roots and hopefully connecting with the land, thinking of eating and drinking as being agricultural acts, and also acts that can promote a healthier ecosystem, encourage stronger local food movements, and also make more nutritious, good food.
Awesome. Well, Avery, thank you so much for joining us here on the Schmooze. Stick around, and we will be back after a break with Sasha, Chack, and Amy Messer, who are a couple of Jews here in Kentucky who are doing big things in the food world. We'll be right back.
Support comes from Vision Zero. On foot or behind the wheel, safety is a shared responsibility. And Vision Zero Louisville believes 0 roadway fatalities is the only acceptable amount. Their mission is to create safe roads by design, engineering solutions, and education. More information at visionzerolouisville.org.
Welcome back to the Bluegrass Schmooze. I'm Rabbi Shani Abramowitz.
And I'm Rabbi Ben Fried.
And in this segment of our episode for this month, we are going to be talking to Amy Messer and Sasha Chack, two Jewish chefs here in Kentucky, who are going to tell us a little bit about their work, their Jewish experience, and their relationship with Jewish food. I'm going to start by introducing Amy. Amy was born and raised in Kentucky, and her experiences with Jewish food in Kentucky started with Shabbat Kiddush luncheons at her friends' bar and bat mitzvahs. She traveled a couple times a year to Cleveland to visit her grandfather, where she was first introduced to Jewish deli. And during one visit, the old-timers thought it would be funny to get her to try beef tongue, and she surprised them by loving it. We're going to have to hear more about that story when we talk. And since then, Amy has made it her goal to visit Jewish delis and restaurants wherever she travels. She loves talking to the kitchen employees and staff and asking them about their techniques and recipes. And she just recently learned how to make kishka at Manny's in Chicago, something she claims she'll never put into action. At home, Amy lives with her amazing partner, her 3 busy kids, and her 3 dogs. It's a daily adventure.
We also have Sasha Chack here, who grew up in Louisville but got his start in New York City restaurant kitchens in 2003. From vegan to Israeli cuisine, from the East Village to Washington Heights, he did it all. After a post-college hiatus in India, Sasha got his big break in 2008 when he was hired as food and beverage director for 92Y Tribeca, a new arts and culture venture in downtown Manhattan, where he oversaw a full-service kosher cafe, a large bar, and cocktail program and catering for clients including MTV, New York Magazine, and Comedy Central. In 2013, Sasha partnered with Chef Ita of the Underground Kosher Supper Club, which sounds super cool, and opened Mason and Mug, a small plates beer and wine bar located in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn. and inspired by the casual eating places of his travels abroad with a seasonal and local food focus. Kind of like we were talking about with Avery, it was taking a lot of different ideas and bringing them into a Jewish and kosher vision. But then after 12 years in New York, Sasha moved back to Louisville, where he launched Izzy's, named for, I am aware, his awesome daughter, a kosher catering and events company focused on global Jewish cuisine. In 2019, Izzy's became a food stall called Cold Smoke Bagel in Logan Street Market, where Sasha focuses on lox and bagel sandwiches, cream cheese schmears, pickles, and herring for you, Shani, and in the New York and Eastern European style Jewish cuisine. Sasha and Amy, welcome to the Schmooze.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're so glad to have you. So let's jump right in, and maybe Amy will start with you, and all of these questions are for both of you to answer. Just tell us a little bit about your experience operating Lex Nash, your Jewish catering company in Lexington.
Oh, it's been quite the adventure, actually. Starting out, just working out of the OZS and the Temple Out of Israel kitchens so that I can provide food directly to the Jewish community here in Lexington. I like to give more variety, I think, than what some of the people are used to. Introducing some of the old favorites of Jewish cooking, as well as bringing in some of the new stuff that we don't get exposure too much here in Lexington, Kentucky.
And I'll just quickly say that Amy catered the season 1 wrap party for the podcast that we hosted in Lexington a couple weeks ago. And actually this morning, I spoke to a congregant who was there who was raving still about the sweet potato knishes that you made.
Yeah, all of the she made potato and onion knishes. She made sweet potato knishes. The knish game was on point.
It was amazing. And I think you're right, Amy, that it really, at least in that venue, was a change from the foods that we maybe normally have at the synagogue. And it was really exciting for people to change things up in that way.
Knish are so much fun because you can keep with the traditional with the potato and onion. You can be a little bit more stretch it out a little bit further and try some different combinations. But keeping that is that little bite that you can hold in your hand and walk around and munch on. Just keeps the fun going.
And Sasha, what about for you here in Louisville?
Running kosher Jewish restaurants?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Cold Smoke Bagels, it's going to be 5 years next month. And that's really been kind of the longest span of really a permanent space that I've done here. And it's great. I get to do Jewish food every day. You know, lox and bagels and herring and smoked whitefish and pickles. You know, it's great.
So I guess one of the questions we had for y'all is, how does the work that you do in the kitchen inform your kind of like Jewish selves? We heard from Avery that there was a term he used, cardiac Jews, that their hearts were so full of schmaltz and brisket and all of the things that kind of filled up their Jewish plate and their Jewish lives. But I know that I don't know, Amy, I don't know you so well, but I know, Sasha, you're kind of very involved in Judaism in a lot of different ways, in synagogue life and in other things. How does the food that you cook impact your identity as a Jewish person? Would you as a Jew look differently if you weren't so intimately connected to the cooking and the food and all of that? And Sasha, we'll go to you first, and then we'll get to you, Amy.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, it's hard to break down because it's just such a part of my life. Like thinking about food, thinking about Jewish food, kosher food. I mean, I worked in kosher food distribution and grocery stores and products. So like I know the Hamisha products, I know the New York products, I know where to source things. But just on a day-to-day level, yeah, like schmearing bagels and, you know, doing the work of the kitchen with food that I see as intrinsically Jewish is like a meaningful thing.
Would you say, it's funny, I almost have a like image of, there's a famous Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who said that when he was, you know, going to civil rights protests, he was praying with his feet. I almost imagine you're like praying with your schmear, like, you know, that there's something like, you know, almost
Like spiritual.
almost spiritual about it.
Yeah, in some ways it's about, identity, it's about culture, it's about representing, because in my shop, like, I have things, they're written in English letters, but they're Hebrew, like the l'chaim platter, or Yiddish. Like, I have a sandwich called the Zaidi, right? Kind of named after my grandfather, a sandwich I think that he would really love. So I have like a little menorah that I turn on for Hanukkah. So it's an identity thing, but I think the it's all tied up in that. Yeah.
I think of the saying, you'll have to help me on getting it correct, but it's they attacked us, we won, let's eat.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that close? So when I cook, it's when I cook, my whole aim is for everybody to gather around, to enjoy the food, to celebrate where we are today, as well as remembering where the foods have come from and how we've got to this position. I always imagine when I'm making some of these old favorites of the generations who have done it before me with the same goal of, that typical Jewish mom. I just want to feed everybody and I want everybody to walk away with full bellies, but also with this celebratory, a thankfulness of having been there, been together with everybody.
And I think, Amy, I'm so glad that you mentioned at the top of the segment that you are primarily working out of the synagogue kitchens in Lexington. As someone who's relatively new to the Lexington Jewish community, I feel like part of my orientation and primer to our shul, to OZS, was hearing all of these almost like mythic legends about women gathering in the OZS kitchen to, cook and bake for onegs or for b'nai mitzvah or weddings, or also to come together to cook in times of mourning and tragedy for families who were sitting shiva. And so the I just want to make sure that we don't lose the symbolism and the symbolic value of being a Jewish woman who's staking out a place in Jewish community in the kitchen, that is such holy work that connects you and us, through your amazing, amazing food to generations of women, but all Jews who came before us to make our Jewish lives and our communities possible. And there's also something so Jewish about just getting messy and doing something with your hands and being out in the world and getting, gunk under your fingernails and cooking and nourishing people. And yeah, it's really powerful. And also amazing to have you and other people in the kitchen at the shul when we have our kids in the building, just to see that is also, Sasha, as you said, a really important way of connecting to your Judaism and giving something back. It's a really beautiful act of service. So I feel like we hear a lot of talk about cultural Judaism, cultural Jews, and food ways are obviously a really important part of that. And Ben and I are rabbis in our communities. We're teachers, and we have a unique role and vantage point. But as Jewish chefs, as people who nourish the community in a very literal kind of way, you're also community leaders in a sense. Um, and I'm curious what you think about your role in helping people live their Judaism, if helping to provide Jewish food and give people access to Jewish food culture in Louisville and Lexington, places where it might not be so obviously available. Um, what do you think about that? How do you feel about being and really playing a role in people living and accessing their Judaism? And Sasha, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that on a regular basis. I
Mhm.
see people, because I'm located in a big public market as a kind of a food stall in a larger food hall. So people walk by who aren't necessarily coming to me, but then they do a double take
Hmm.
because they see something Jewish, or it looks very New York. It's all white subway tile and kind of inspired by Russ and Daughters from the Lower East Side. So people definitely do a double take, and then I get people telling me like, "Oh, I'm Jewish," or my grandmother was Jewish, and this is food I grew up with, or I'm from New York or New Jersey. So culturally, people definitely identify Um, you know, I did kosher pop-ups around town before I opened Cold Smoke Bagels. I did holiday catering. I did Rosh Hashanah catering. I did breakfast, Yom Kippur breakfast catering. So yeah, that's definitely such an important role in a community, is providing the foods that people use to connect to their, not only their culture, to their religion. It's really, food is the connection.
Yeah. I will just mention, and then we'll get to in a second, Avery, that a non-zero number of members of Knesset Israel found us because they first went to Sasha, and like went to Cold Smoke Bagel, and there's a term people sometimes use, bageling yourself, when you reveal to some other Jew that you are Jewish in public, and so they've bageled themselves to Sasha, and told him that they're Jewish, and Sasha has either connected with them or passed their names on to me, or told them, hey, you come check out the synagogue. And so really, I think it's very cool that you view your role, because you are Jewish in such a public space, as also a connector of people to other Jewish institutions. And I think that is really, really very cool, because you are publicly Jewish in a way that a synagogue is not, or in a way that a JCC is not. And I think that it's very cool that you use that. And I'm sure there are many more Jews who never come to synagogue, even though they come to Cold Smoke Bagel. But the fact that you do use that as a connector, I think, is a very cool and a very wonderful place that you situate yourself in the community.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun. It's fun, and I get to eat good food all the time. So,
Baruch Hashem. What about you, Amy? How do you view yourself in that kind of like almost leadership role in the community as nourisher, as bringer of Jewish food? Is that part of your mission? Like, I mean, obviously people go into business to make money, but is that also kind of part of your concept of what you do?
I mean, if you're going into the restaurant business to make money, then I have more information to give you. It's not a place where you're gonna be able to go and retire and enjoy all the efforts of your labor. You have to find enjoyment for your labor outside of the monetary reward, because restaurants are a tough business. But I really enjoy. I tell people all the time that I'm a back of house person. The front of house, I can be awkward sometimes, but back of the house in a kitchen, I feel the ingredients. I am able to create this really exciting food that people don't know, or maybe are being reintroduced to, and that provides me kind of an entry into an acceptance of being Jewish, an entry into the world of Judaism that I didn't really feel that much growing up. But the food has really helped me become more connected with the Jewish people, learning about the foods, why we eat certain foods, how they're related to different holidays, but also looking at different cultures and seeing the foods that they ate there, that Jewish community, and why that Jewish community has used those ingredients. It's gives me a better understanding of Jewish people, of our shared history, and allows just me the opportunity to get my hands dirty.
Awesome. So switching gears a little bit, we want to ask you, because you both cook and probably eat lots of very wonderful things, what is your favorite thing to cook, and what is your favorite thing to eat, and are they the same or are they different things? So Amy, we've started with Sasha last time, so we'll start with you for this one. Doesn't have to be a Jewish thing, but I mean, you are on the Bluegrass Schmooze. But your favorite thing to cook and your favorite thing to eat, and is there overlap?
Of course, there's I have to like everything that I eat, or that I cook. The favorite thing that I really like to cook dishes that are that take time. Like, one of my favorite things to do is to just cook a basic chicken stock that'll be ready for matzo balls. Getting the chicken and cooking the chicken and getting the meat off of the chicken, and then turning the bones into a wonderful rich stock. It's I feel like the more steps, almost the bigger reward at the end, the biggest like bang for my buck, when I know that I've been putting 1-2 days into creating a dish. It's just it's a lot of fun. My favorite thing to eat, I'm not sure. I'm a pretty wide range eater. This morning I had a weird amalgamation of beans and rice, and I had some gribbinus left over that I'm slightly embarrassed to say that I mixed in with the beans and rice. Garbinus is it's kind of the byproduct of when you make schmaltz, but it's the skin of the chicken that all the fat has been rendered out, and you get this nice little crunchy bites of chicken skin, which I know it sounds awful, and Jewish food is not good for the heart in the long run. But a little treat once in a while, and make the schmaltz, and I get the byproduct of the grippiness, and I like to call it my my Jewish bacon. Make a GLT sometimes if I've got enough.
Ooh, GLT.
That's a good one.
Sasha, what about you? Favorite things to cook and eat?
Well, I love to grill. I grill almost every single Shabbos, before Shabbos dinner. I differently am impatient as a cook, and so I like to do things quickly. I mean, I like making Jewish comfort food. I love making potato kugel. I like eating it. I don't like making it. It's a pain to grate all those potatoes and onions, and it makes a mess, but it's so good. So I do love latkes and potato kugel. I love fried chicken. Again, that's a process, and so it's not easy to make, but I love to eat it. But yeah.
So you love cooking things quickly and eating the things that take a long time.
Exactly. I'm impatient.
So thinking about running a food stall here in Louisville, and Amy, your restaurant in Lexington, and now Lexnosh, your catering company. What are some interesting interactions that you've had with Jews and also with people who aren't Jewish? Any notable encounters that you've had?
Good encounters or not so?
Either one. We want to be honest about what the experience is like. Do you have a lot of less than good encounters?
No, but just one popped to mind. I mean, I guess I can talk about it. It was early on. So at Cold Smoke Bagels, we make these caps that have Jewish things on them. Like they say lox, or they say l'chaim. They're like Jewish caps. So I was a fan of Heb magazine in the 90s, which was a very cool, like irreverent Jewish magazine. So I had caps made that said Heb, right? Because to me, it's coming back. Like there's this Yiddish show.
Yeah.
It's like Jews now are like saying, "What's up, Heb?" Like it's cool now. Little did I know that, like in the 60s, it was like a totally anti-Semitic thing to call a Jew. So an older guy was getting bagels and saw the hat. I mean, this was years ago. And he pointed at it. He was like, no, take that down. And I was like, no, it's from Heb magazine. Heb magazine is a great magazine. And he was like, take that down. So that really like shook me, like, whoa, I'm trying to do an irreverent Jewish thing that is, culturally Jewish, but at the same time kind of challenging, maybe what's traditional. And it really clashed with this older, generation. So that popped out of me. But yeah, I mean, I've had like the typical, people, saying, oh, this bagel's stale, or there's not enough lox, or, those typical kind of Jewish interactions. And then
I love it. Typical Jewish interactions is complaints.
Right. Which is, is part of the name of the game. That's Jewish,
Just to tell a quick story about that, one of Shani and my classmates was doing their internship actually at the synagogue of Rabbi Jeremiah Kalmanovsky, who we talked to a couple episodes ago. And someone called the synagogue asking for the rabbi. And she was the rabbinic intern. And so they passed it on to her. And she said, how can I help you? And they said, no, I need to talk to the rabbi. And she's like, well, maybe I can help. I'm the rabbinic intern. The person said, only the rabbi can handle this. She said, what is the issue that I need to pass on to the rabbi? And she said, there's too much mayo in the tuna salad at Kiddush. that was the thing that had to go to the rabbi.
Right.
So in a way, you are fielding very Jewish,
Exactly.
very Jewish things there. But have you had do non-Jews ever come up and ask you questions about Judaism, or have things to say about Judaism, or I don't know, like, I have non-Jews sometimes who try to convert me, or like, different things. Does that happen to you at the stall?
Not too much, very little. Once I had, somebody say, a customer say, "Oh, are you Jewish?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "But what do you think about Jesus?" And I was like, "I'm busy right now." And people do ask me if I'm Jewish, and I say, "Yeah, for sure." But thankfully it's always been nice, positive interactions. People are very nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. That's good. And Amy, what about you?
I've had pretty consistently good interactions with people in my food. My first attempts to provide Jewish food was when I owned an Irish pub. So I had a second kitchen working out of the Irish pub, and just the looks on I could tell that the person was Jewish when they came in and what they were looking for, and it was not an Irish pub. And they were always so surprised but excited that I had matzo ball soup and I had pastrami to sell them. I think that my favorite feedback though that I've ever gotten about my food was a woman who came in and she ordered a pastrami sandwich to go, and she came back maybe a half hour later and told me that it was too spicy and that she had eaten pastrami in Miami and in Germany and that my pastrami was just too spicy. And I really appreciated the feedback because, black pepper is a main ingredient in the rub for pastrami. So you would expect a little bit of spice, but she was so convinced that because of her travels, she knew exactly what it should taste like. But you get feedback from everybody and you just you learn how to roll with it. While also knowing that, the food that I'm making it's in Kentucky. I wasn't raised in New York or in Cleveland or other places that have solid Jewish populations. So I felt some degree of needing to accentuate my Jewishness, I guess, to make it more authentic. I have since kind of grown past that because the food that I am doing is authentic because I'm using recipes from people who came before me, but I'm also Jewish and I'm also bringing my own flair to it and bringing my own interpretations and mixing in a little bit of Kentucky because we're in the diaspora and that's what Jewish people do is we find those good foods and present them in a good Jewish way while still recognizing our history, but also where we are and what's available to us.
So, yes, and you're talking about that, and you're talking about the gribbiness before. Do we think a gribbiness hot brown is possible? Is that
Oh, wow.
Is that because I've never had a hot brown, which
Me
is like
either,
the
yeah.
classic Louisville, dish. And so now I'm thinking, Sasha, or Amy, can a gribbiness hot brown be something that is pulled together?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to be holding y'all to that.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here.
I know we need to find something a little not so unhealthy. I'm always on a stretch. I'm always trying to figure out ways to not be so unhealthy. And those hot browns, those are heavy dish.
Well, there was a saying in the community that I grew up in that, calories and anything unhealthy doesn't count on Shabbos or on holidays. So
yes.
We'll make sure to indulge in our gribbiness hot brown on a Shabbos. And we'll be protected.
I like that.
We're going to change gears. And at the end of every interview and conversation that we do with our guests, we do a lightning round where we ask you just quick, sort of off-the-cuff questions. And you're not supposed to think very hard about your answer. Just the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the prompt. And Ben and I will go back and forth. So, Amy, we'll start with you. Favorite Jewish holiday?
Passover.
Sasha?
Sukkot. Sitting outside.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent holidays. Sasha, we'll start with you. Honey cake or apples and honey?
Apples and honey. Traditional Rosh Hashanah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amy?
Definitely apples and honey.
Yeah.
Okay, Amy, best Purim costume that you've worn or that you've seen?
I'm not sure. I enjoy when people dress up as that name that we're not allowed to say, just giving everybody an excuse to yell every time I'm around.
And Sasha?
Purim costume. I always kind of dress like a Hasidic person, which is funny because I think in my regular dress I also look like a Hasidic. So I just kind of dress like, myself. Just when I was in Israel for the year, I dressed like a Chassid on Purim, which is weird because there's so many Hasidim there anyway that I just blended in.
All right, best break fast food. When you're breaking your fast on Yom Kippur, what are you going to first? Sasha.
Bagels and lox. Classic.
And how about you, Amy?
That was the first thing that popped into my head as well. Then that ubiquitous tuna salad, there's something quite comforting about having that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Amy, favorite biblical character?
Oh, wow. You guys should have given me some of these things to think about before. I'm not really sure. It's I guess it's our mothers who come out of it. And the women who've come out of the Bible and the lessons that we can learn from them. I guess immediately I was thinking of Ruth.
Yeah. Great.
Favorite biblical character?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, there's so many. Yisro.
Nice.
Yeah, he was cool.
Great.
Yeah, Moses' father-in-law.
Yitro,
yeah.
He was a party guy.
He was a party guy. And then last but most certainly not least, and this is important because you're chefs, Hamantaschen or Latka? Sasha.
Latkes.
And Amy?
I'm always going to go for the lot because
Correct.
Yes,
That's
well
the
done.
correct answer.
Very proud of both of you. You've passed our test. And then we conclude each month with a l'chaim of the month. A l'chaim, as our listeners by now know, is a lifting of the glass, a lifting up of a person, an organization, of someone that is doing good things that you want to highlight, and that you want to kind of lift up and share a little bit of goodness. It could be someone who had an important milestone, or someone who's been doing good work, or just someone important in your life. So does anyone have a l'chaim of the month that they wanna start off with?
I can go first.
Go ahead, Johnny.
My l'chaim of the month I want to raise to Brian Darer, who's a community member of ours, who organizes a program called Backpacking at our synagogue, where Brian organizes dozens of volunteers to pack hundreds of bags of non-perishable food for food insecure kids in Lexington. And he's involved our religious school students, adults, all sorts of people in the community to do this really important act of chesed for the wider Lexington community, and making sure that kids who don't have enough can go home over the weekend from school and have enough to eat. So l'chaim to Brian.
L'chaim.
l'chaim.
Amy or Sasha, do you have a l'chaim?
Sure. My son is getting ready to start he's kind of got a countdown to his bar mitzvah. He's just been assigned his mentor that he's going to be working with. I'm super excited about his journey over the next year, and getting more at the synagogue and getting him prepared and seeing all of his progress. It's very exciting.
Amazing.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. I'll give a l'chaim to Rabbi Ben Fried for being a community organizer and leader. And I've seen the good work that he's done. So l'chaim.
L'chaim. And we are recording this. It'll come out a little bit after Rosh Hashanah, but we're recording this on a special day in Louisville called Give for Good. And so I actually want to give my l'chaim to the Louisville Community Foundation, and really to the city of Louisville. That it's such an amazing thing that we just have this day where literally millions of dollars are raised for our nonprofits all around the city. There are over 500 nonprofits that participate, and the Louisville Community Foundation gets people to donate all these different prizes that you can win if you donate at certain times, or if you're like the lucky number, whatever. And it's just really amazing to live in a city that rallies in this way for its nonprofits, for the people doing good work in the community. I know we're recording this obviously at the Louisville Public Media Studios. They're raising money. Our synagogue raises money through this. So many different amazing organizations get just a real boost in their fundraising from this one day. And it's all done through this website where you might go to donate to one organization, but then you see another organization and, oh, they look like they're doing really cool stuff. And all of a sudden you want to donate to them. And I think it's just really amazing as a community that we really rally in this way to support the people who are doing such good work. So l'chaim to the Community Foundation and to all of Louisville for giving for good.
L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Thank you both so much for being here. We love chatting with our community members, and I know that I'm leaving here really, really hungry and excited to do some more learning about Jewish food and more cooking. Perfect timing because we're recording on a Thursday afternoon, getting ready for Shabbat. So I'm going to think about my menu for this weekend a little bit differently. And really just thank you both so much for your time. We love chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for schmoozing.
Thank you.
That's it for the first episode of our second season. Hope your holidays have been memorable and meaningful. We'll be back in the next month for Cheshvan. And just in time for Election Day in the United States, we're going to talk about Jews and civic engagement. We'll see you then.
The Bluegrass Schmooze is created and produced by Rabbi Ben Fried and me, Rabbi Shani Abramowitz. Our executive producer is Laura Ellis. We get audio assistance from Alex Biscardi. Our social media coordinator is Eden Unger. Our show is made possible by support from the Jewish Heritage Fund. Our opening and closing song is Jew from Kentucky, written by Dan Byrne and performed by Dan Byrne and Bridget Kalin. Thanks to Knesset Israel Congregation in Louisville and Ohave Zion Synagogue in Lexington for believing in two young rabbis and helping us make this podcast a reality. You can find us on Instagram at Bluegrass Schmooze. For more information, to keep in touch, and to learn how you can help us continue this work, visit bluegrassschmooze.org.
We're Jews from Kentucky, that's what we are. We drink our mint juleps from a kosher dill jar. Wherever we wander, wherever we roam, Jews from Kentucky is always at home.
Support comes from Vision Zero. On foot or behind the wheel, safety is a shared responsibility. And Vision Zero Louisville believes 0 roadway fatalities is the only acceptable amount. Their mission is to create safe roads by design, engineering solutions, and education. More information at visionzerolouisville.org.